The neoconservative movement took place in the 1980s. Ever since the 1960s, the liberals have been taking many steps forward, beginning with civil rights, going on to the 1960s with anti-war and military protests, which eventually turned into counterculture, and Americans began overindulging. Overindulgence led to an overall decrease in morals, which included excessive sex and use of drugs. Finally, in the 1970s, President Carter took the last stand for the liberals, pushing the conservatives over the edge. After Carter, even Democrats were sick of themselves. The neoconservatives, however, had four main points. First was the size and imbalance of the government. Next came the deregulation of the economy. Then the moral values in America, which had steadily been slipping, and then greater military spending. Obviously, the neoconservatives needed a representative. By the time the election rolled around, their nominee actually took 90% of the electoral votes. Who was this nominee, you may ask? Former actor Ronald Reagan. In his inaugural address, Reagan said, "Government is not the solution to our problem, government is the problem." Government needed to be balanced out. Government problems included high taxes, a high inflation and unemployment rate, and high deficit spending. Reagan started by decreasing the taxes on the rich by about 34%, giving them about $24,000 more a year. At the same time, he decreased the taxes on the lower class by only 15%, giving them only $600 more a year. In doing so, the rich would spend more money, and eventually the money would trickle down to the lower class. This was known as supply-side economics. Supply-side economics helped the rich get richer. As a result, the wealthy could spend more money. At the same time, Reagan deregulated the stock market so businesses could spend their money more freely. Rules were no longer enforced and unions no longer supported. In some companies, work became more difficult, and in many cases, both parents of a household had to work to earn enough money. Deregulation was still a benefit, however, because prices lowered due to the competition in business. Reagan cut government spending not only in business deregulation, but also for programs for the poor such as welfare, but he increased the military spending. The money spent in military well made up for the programs he cut. Communism wasn't Reagan's only problem during his presidency. Military involvement in the Middle East included Israel, Iran, and Lebanon. Israeli conflicts with Lebanon led Reagan to choose to send U.S. Marines into Lebanon. While they were there, many Americans were reminded of Vietnam. A suicide bomber ran into U.S. Marine barracks, killing 200 Marines. Reagan now required that three objectives be met before America interfered with other countries. Number 1, clear objectives. Number 2 was public support, and number 3 was, if they were going to go anywhere, they needed the arms to win. Later, Iranians went into Lebanon and captured U.S. embassy hostages. Reagan stated America would not deal with terrorists and encouraged other countries to do the same. Reagan also dealt with countries in Central America and in the Caribbean, which included Panama, Nicaragua, Grenada, and El Salvador. Most of his efforts were focused in Nicaragua, where the Sandinistas, the left wing, were fighting against the Contras, the right wing. Reagan wanted to support the Contras, saying they were like America's founding father. However, Americans decided they wanted no involvement with Nicaragua, whether it be funded with money or by military. Reagan claimed he was neither helping the Contras nor dealing with the terrorists, but in reality his administration was selling missiles. Missiles would be given to Israel to sell to Iran, and the money would be given to Israel, who would send the money to the Contras. Reagan was not behind the actions, however his words were. He had said that he wanted anything done to help the Contras and save the hostages. Concerning the Cold War, Reagan had zero tolerance for communism. As a result of this, the Cold War ended shortly after his presidency. The success was more to economy than anything else. Reagan's plan was to restart the arms race. America had a greater economy, so we were able to build more weapons and work harder on defense. If Russia wanted to keep up with us, they would have had to crash their economy. Reagan once joked, "My fellow Americans, I'm pleased to tell you today that I've signed legislation that will outlaw Russia forever. Bombing begins in 5 minutes." Over time, however, Reagan came to terms with Premier Gorbachev. Gorbachev was not the typical communist. In fact, he banned the Communist Party from having a part in government. Gorbachev then resigned, and 14 non-Russian republics left the Soviet Union. In its place was the Commonwealth of Independent States, led by President Boris Yeltsin. Back at home, the neoconservatives were exercising their place as the moral majority. There were several domestic issues in America, one of which was the discovery of AIDS in America. The first case of AIDS was found in a young gay man. The AIDS spread among his group of friends who were gay, and also drug users who shared needles. AIDS is shared through unprotected sex, sharing needles, and mother-to-child conception. AIDS was named in 1982. AIDS stands for Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome. It comes from HIV, which stands for Human Immunodeficiency Virus. There are many symptoms for HIV and AIDS, some of which include extreme fatigue and weight loss, persisting swollen glands, purple spots, and mental deterioration, such as forgetting often. Not all signs of HIV and AIDS are visible. Seeing as AIDS came from immoral activities, not much time was spent from the government in order to find cures or ways to prevent the disease. Many lives were lost as a result. Other issues, such as family values, had more weight to the conservatives. The 50s family value had disappeared, leaving mostly angry and angsty teens. In addition, women were fighting for abortion rights. Women felt it was their choice as the mother, but most conservatives saw it as murder. One of the biggest issues neoconservatives had with America was the reverse discrimination. They felt discrimination had gone too far because minorities were getting advantages simply because they were the minorities. For many conservatives, it was just a different type of racial profiling. Whether people agree with him or not, Reagan did a lot of good for America. His Reaganomics policy actually helped the stock market quite a bit. And while not all of America's moral problems were solved, at least reverse discrimination was taken care of a little bit. Considering his foreign affairs, he did make a few mistakes. Still, Reagan gets much of the credit for the ending of the Cold War, and therefore bringing about more peace. While Reagan did a lot of oppressing for the liberals, he did a world of good for the Republicans, who were pretty happy about what he did. Economically, his success was only short-term. Concerning the world, he'll always be remembered.